All right, everyone, you may have heard that Jean Carroll is now, she's claiming that Donald Trump sexually assaulted her back in the 90s. Once again, you have yet another uncorroborated allegation against Trump. The problem is this. People learned that you could weaponize, the outrage mob within the political world if you made false allegations like Trump has already faced, Kavanaugh has faced as well. And so now there's going to naturally, I think, be questions in people's minds about, well, it didn't come forward for 20, 30 years. You'd think that maybe somebody would be able to corroborate that at the time you at least said something, number one, which isn't always the case. Number two, here's the inevitable problem that you run into with such a thing. You can't prove a negative. So when Trump simply says, well, it didn't happen, if somebody assumes that Trump is a slimy individual, it just reinforces further their belief. You don't have to have any proof. You don't have to have any evidence. The claim itself is the proof, according to some people in the public. This is the exact opposite of an enlightened way of thinking. The enlightened way of thinking is saying, well, if you're going to make the claim, I want to have evidence. The problem is when you're talking about something that happened multiple years ago, if not decades in some cases, you're simply not going to have that. I tend to be skeptical of such claims when they're levied against anyone at this point, specifically because the whole thing is that somebody's life can be ruined who's innocent. The problem is when you're talking about sex assault, rape, anything like that, allegations of that specific type, people have more of an emotional response to it. Or like someone abuses their animal or the kids or something. Anything along those lines, the emotional response is stronger than like saying, well, like Trump cheated on his taxes. I know firsthand. He was talking about it to me 10 years ago. Well, that doesn't cause an emotional response. People might say, oh, well, that's terrible or something like that, but it doesn't have that same particular reflex that other, especially sex abuse allegations, tend to have. The problem is that then it can be weaponized because people know that it works. They put out an allegation, a bunch of lynch mob forms, and jumps down that person's throat. It doesn't even matter if there's zero evidence. The claim itself is taken as evidence. So I don't know. I don't believe the claims. No, I'm not going to say, well, hashtag believe her. I don't have any evidence to go on. Again, talking about years and years ago. Why wasn't it talked about at the time? And people say, well, he's such a rich, powerful man, nobody wanted to tangle with him. Well, yeah, maybe so. Maybe that's the case, but, Ken, what do you expect me to do? Sit there and pretend to be outraged at a claim that I don't even believe? I brewed really good coffee this morning, by the way, just saying. You brew it dark, and then I always put some milk in it. Not like creamer and shit like that, just milk, preferably whole milk, only 2% at the moment, so not quite the same. It's just not as buttery and smooth. If I can whip it up with that spoon, it's so great. Really gets you going. The other thing that I saw, this is funny, some of the further left tabloid rags are like, well, why isn't this generating as much attention as before? And it's like, well, here, let me explain it to you in no uncertain terms. The Me Too thing brought forth a tidal wave of allegations that exhausted the public's interest in the basic subject. As far as the extended lynch mob sort of went, that's all passed by. Now you're back to the humdrum sort of age before hashtag Me Too, which is that some people will be concerned, but ultimately some people will realize if no evidence is being given, there is no reason to believe the claims. The whole believe her thing falls apart when you start dealing with cases for which there is no evidence. No corroboration, no evidence of any kind, and you're wondering why people aren't taking it more seriously. Like, why aren't people talking about it all day? Well, because it's not interesting to them anymore. At this point, the Orange Man bad thing has fallen apart for two reasons. Half the population assumes Orange Man is bad, and they titillate themselves, so, you can't really drive them into overdrive anymore. They're already at peak outrage on a given day anyway. It's like between a 9 and a 10 out of 10 on the anger scale if you're a social justice warrior right now. And the other half of the population doesn't believe Orange Man bad. And those of us who fall into that category, Jean Carroll says, therefore true. No, that's not the way that it works. It's like if there's an allegation against some Democratic politician, like with there are some cases where it's different. Like with Al Franken, he had a picture of him groping a reporter. You had a physical piece of evidence that something was going on. He tried to explain it, and it fell flat, and his lawyer tried to shill online, it looks like, at one point, and pretend to be the victim or something, like pretended to speak. There's a really weird shilling campaign with Franken. Somebody needs to dig a little bit deeper into that, I think, still. Gillibrand, by the way, the sane Democrat at the time, for throwing him under the bus. Elizabeth Warren by now joining Julian Castro and saying that we should just have open borders in the most literal sense. By the way, did you know that the third-tier Democratic Party candidate is now openly calling for open borders, decriminalizing illegal crossings? Did you know that? Yeah, the Democratic Party has not gone far left. They're perfectly sane and normal. The Democratic Party wants... Their top candidate has his own Me Too problem, plus he's older than dirt. Their second place candidate is an avowed socialist, wants me to pay like a 50-60% tax rate. And then their third in line candidate wants literal open borders, like not kind of open borders, not border reform as a liberal would envision it, like literally open borders, like there shouldn't be anything there. You should be able to, I guess, freely walk across it. Are Americans going to get to freely walk across into like Canada and Mexico? Okay, well then at least it's even. I'm going to cross over into Mexico at a whim then and see what happens and see how long I don't go to prison for. That would be interesting. Yeah, I'm going to live on the southern border. I'm going to cross over to get lunch every day. Yeah, that'll fly. I'm sure the Mexican government won't have a problem with that sort of bullshit. So she's sunk her campaign fundamentally. It's going to be funny to see where her polling goes. She's going to become a wedge issue candidate for sure. But as far as Jean Carroll goes, the hashtag believer, hashtag MeToo stuff has simply grown old. Because we have after the Kavanaugh situation, it sort of implodes, because here you're trying to muck up the political system on, again, mere claim. Some of the allegations were so fucking crazy, so out there, that I don't even think most of the leftists believe them. They just sort of went along with it for political reasons, for exposure at that point. That's about all. Peace out.